I've made the same breakfast every Sunday for over 40 years. Fluffy biscuits with salted butter, scrambled eggs just the way David likes them, and fresh coffee brewed in the old drip pot that gurgles like it's waking up with me. That morning was no different. I was up at 6, apron on before my slippers even found the floor. The house was quiet, but it always was this early. I figured they were still asleep, wrapped up in weekend dreams, so I cooked. I always cooked. I remember humming something, maybe an old Patsy Cline song, as I stirred the eggs. The biscuits were golden and ready. I poured 3 cups of coffee, set the table with the green ceramic plates they got me last Christmas, and waited for footsteps. Nothing. No creaking stairs, no bathroom door, just the slow tick of the clock above the sink and the low hum of the refrigerator. At first, I didn't think much of it. Teenagers like Nico loved to sleep in, and David had been working long shifts. Maybe they were taking the morning slow, but by 7:30, something felt off. My coffee had gone cold, and the eggs were starting to dry in the pan. I called upstairs. Breakfast is ready, but the silence that answered felt heavier than usual. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees aching like they always do when the weather turns. The hallway was still, doors open, beds made. Too neatly. That stopped me. Lana never made beds, not unless company was coming or she was trying to prove something. I stepped into their room. The closet was empty, not messy, empty, not a sock, not a pair of jeans, not a bra strap on the floor, just hangers. I opened drawers, cleared out, bathroom cabinets, toothbrush gone, hairbrush gone. Every sign of daily life erased. I felt my throat tighten as I crossed into Nico's room. His posters were still on the wall, but his backpack was missing. His desk drawers were open and barren. His favorite sneakers, gone. All of it gone. Back downstairs, I checked the front closet. No coats, no shoes. I opened the garage. Their car? Gone. No note, no message. Just a hole where a family used to be. I walked back to the kitchen, my hand trembling. As I pulled out a chair, I sat down and looked at the 3 plates on the table, still waiting. I had set them like always, one for me, one for David, one for Lana. They were warm, still warm. And just like that, I realized I had cooked for ghosts. Everything looked exactly like it should, except they were gone. All of them. Just gone. I sat there staring at the 3 cups of coffee, steam curling into the air like ghosts dancing above their graves. I always poured David's first. He liked it black. Then Lana's, just a splash of cream, no sugar. And mine, the way I'd always made it, since before I even had a husband to pour for. 2 sugars and half a teaspoon of powdered milk. I never realized how personal it was until that moment when nobody was there to drink them. I stood up slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath me, like even the house was confused. I walked to the front window and pulled back the curtain. Their car was gone, that much I already knew, but so was the energy. No jacket flung over the porch rail, no half-deflated basketball Nico usually left in the yard. The wind blew through the bare trees, and I felt like I was standing in the aftermath of a storm I hadn't heard coming. I moved through the house in a daze, checking rooms I'd already checked, as if maybe I'd missed something the first time. A note tucked in a drawer, a voicemail blinking on the phone, an excuse, a reason, something. But there was nothing. Not a crumpled receipt, not a grocery list, not even a coffee stain to prove they'd ever existed in that space with me. Just clean surfaces and a stillness that felt louder than shouting. In the hallway, I stared at the framed pictures, smiling faces, frozen in time. David at the lake, holding up a fish with a grin too big for his face. Lana and Nico on the porch with sparklers on the 4th of July. Our family Thanksgiving. All of us packed around the table. I still sat at every night, even when they ate elsewhere or brought food home instead of touching what I'd made. I walked to my room, opened the closet, and sat on the cedar chest at the end of the bed. That's where I kept the gifts they gave me. Birthday cards, macaroni crafts from Nico, a bracelet Lana bought one year that she said reminded her of old country charm. I hadn't worn it in years. I opened the chest, empty, all of it, gone. The scarf David gave me, the yellow sweater Nico picked out when he was 5, the world's best mom mug. Every last piece of my history with them had been taken, not left behind. Taken. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a sudden emergency, a rushed departure, or a misunderstanding. It was a decision, a plan, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I walked back to the kitchen. The coffee had gone cold. I dumped each cup down the sink, listening to the liquid swirl down the drain like it was washing away years of routine. I stood there for a long time with the faucet still running. Because that morning, I hadn't just lost a family. I had lost my witnesses, the people who saw me every day, even if they didn't look anymore. And when you lose your witnesses, it's like you start to disappear too. By mid-morning, the sun was crawling through the blinds, warm and gold like it always was. But it felt like it was shining on someone else's house. I moved through the rooms like I was trespassing. My own steps felt foreign. Echoes followed me like strangers. I didn't cry, not yet. Something deeper than tears was holding me still, something thick and unmoving. I ended up in the kitchen again, where the evidence of my mourning still sat untouched. The biscuits had cooled to stiff pale discs. The eggs were rubbery. One plate had a butter smear where I'd meant to place the toast, and the sink, it was full. As always, cups, bowls from the night before, a pan still sticky with Lana's favorite pasta sauce. I remember thinking, if they knew they were leaving, why didn't they clean up? But of course, they didn't care about that. Why should they? I would have done it. I always did. Every night, every morning, for years. I cooked and cleaned, folded and scrubbed, not because I was expected to, but because I thought it meant something. I thought it was love. And maybe it was, in my language, but I guess they spoke something else. I pulled on my gloves and started washing the dishes, because what else was I supposed to do? Sit and scream? Kick the walls? I couldn't even yell at a soul. No one was here to hear me. So I scrubbed the coffee cups. I scraped the dried cheese from the casserole pan. I rinsed the forks and placed them neatly on the drying rack like it was any other day. But with every dish, every towel dry, the weight of the silence pressed heavier on my chest. Why hadn't they said goodbye? Why hadn't David told me? Why hadn't Nico at least left a note? Even a "thanks for everything, Grandma," scribbled on a napkin would have meant something. Instead, they vanished like a dream you forget as soon as your feet touch the floor. I opened the trash can to toss a crumpled paper towel, and that's when I saw it. An empty key hook, my house key, the spare, gone. It was the one I kept in the drawer, just in case someone lost theirs. Someone had taken it. Not only had they left without telling me, they'd left with the tools to make sure I couldn't follow. That's when my hands started to shake. I gripped the edge of the sink to steady myself. This wasn't just distance. It wasn't just avoidance. It was a shut door, a turned lock. And suddenly, the house I thought I knew, this house I'd cooked in, loved in, raised my son in, felt like it belonged to someone else. Like I'd wandered into a stage set of a life that used to be mine. And the worst part, no one had even bothered to pack up the dishes, because they all assumed I'd be there to clean up what they left behind. The thing about people disappearing is you think you'll hear something, a bang, a whisper, a door slamming in the night. You expect a storm before the silence, but when my family vanished, it happened like mist burning off in the morning sun. Nothing loud, nothing sudden, just absence, complete and absolute. After I cleaned the kitchen, I wandered to the living room and sat in my chair, the same one I sat in every night after dinner, while the others watched TV or scrolled their phones. My body moved out of habit, but my mind kept repeating one thought over and over again. Where are they? Not in a worried way. No, that worry had already started to evolve into something more complicated, something with jagged edges. I picked up the cordless phone and dialed David's number. It rang once, then straight to voicemail. I tried again, same result. I called Lana's phone. Her usual cheerful voicemail message now felt like mockery. I left no message. What was the point? Then I called Nico. His voicemail was different, new, a deepened teenage voice now, not the little boy I remembered who used to say, "Leave a message for the coolest kid in the world." Now it just said, "Hey, it's Nico. You know what to do." I didn't leave a message there either. I stared at the phone in my lap and thought of all the hours I'd spent waiting for it to ring. Birthdays, holidays, Mother's Day. But they always came home, even if it was late, even if it was with cold fast food in hand instead of a thank you. They came home. Until now, I walked through the house again, slower this time, inspecting every detail. The coat hooks by the door, 3 coats gone, mine still there. The hallway shelf, Nico's baseball trophies missing, but the broken clock he never liked still there. Their bedroom drawers, cleared out, all of it intentional. Not an emergency, not an accident, a decision. That's what burned most. The planning, the quiet packing, the meals I cooked while they were hiding suitcases in the trunk, the laughs we shared while they looked me in the eye and pretended everything was fine. And I hadn't noticed. I was too busy pouring gravy and folding laundry to see that I was being erased in real time. And then, the quiet, the television turned off, the back door untouched, the mail slot empty, everything still, like the house itself had paused, waiting for someone to admit what had happened. But they weren't coming back. That much was clear now. Not tonight, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. And as I stood in the middle of that too clean living room, something hit me so hard I nearly sat back down from the weight of it. No one disappears that neatly, unless they've been planning it for a long, long time. And if they had planned this, that meant I'd been living beside strangers. Strangers who wore my last name. Strangers who ate from my table. And worst of all, strangers who once called me Mom. The sun had moved to the other side of the house, casting long strips of gold across the hardwood floors. The silence was thicker now, not the soft kind, but the sharp, buzzing kind that makes your ears ache. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the dresser. My hand moved before I could stop it. I opened the top drawer, not out of curiosity, but instinct, as if some part of me already knew where to look. It was tucked beneath my folded scarves, an envelope, white, thick, sealed. My name wasn't on it. No handwriting. Just a printed label that read, "To be mailed, Bank of Illinois, Springfield Branch." My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. I knew it wasn't mine, but it was in my house, in my drawer, and I was done asking permission. I tore the flap open slowly. Inside were printed documents, neatly stapled, signed in ink. My heart pounded as my eyes scanned the page. Quitclaim deed, power of attorney, transfer of ownership, all dated 6 months ago. My hands started to shake so hard I had to sit down. The names signed at the bottom: David Eves and Lana Eves, my son and his wife. But what chilled me most? My name wasn't on a single page, not even as a witness. I flipped through each paper, hoping, begging, for an explanation, a mistake, a scribble in the margins that said, "Don't worry, Mom, this is just in case." But there was nothing, just legal language and sharp, deliberate ink. The house, the property, the account, gone. All quietly taken, while I was baking peach cobbler. And it hadn't even been mailed. It had been hidden. In my drawer. Why? Because they'd already done what they needed to do. The mailing was a formality, a final step in a plan they'd been executing while smiling at me across the dinner table. Every chore I did, every bowl I washed, every meal I served, it had all been happening while they were emptying the foundation beneath me. I gripped the edge of the dresser as the room began to spin. They hadn't just left me. They had taken the roof from over my head and left without so much as a goodbye. And if these papers were real, if they held up in court, I might not even be the legal owner of my own home anymore. I stumbled back into the hallway and looked around. Suddenly, everything looked unfamiliar, cold. The floral wallpaper, the quilted curtains, the chipped ceramic dog in the corner. They had been part of my world for decades, but now I saw them through different eyes. Eyes that knew betrayal didn't always come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it came with silence and paper. Sometimes the people who love you smile while they take everything away. I sat back down in my chair and folded the envelope shut. They had planned this, not overnight, not out of frustration, but over months. And they had counted on one thing most of all: that I'd be too kind, too trusting, too old to notice. They were wrong. I couldn't stop thinking about the night before they left. It haunted me. Not because something terrible had happened, but because nothing had. It had been like every other night. I made beef stew, just like I always did when the air turned chilly. Nico was scrolling on his phone, barely looking up. David came in late from work, kissed the top of my head, absent-mindedly, and mumbled, "Smells good, Ma." Lana didn't say anything at all. We ate in silence. Not an uncomfortable one, at least not on the surface. It was the kind of silence that had crept in gradually, replacing laughter and conversation with nods, half smiles, and short answers. I used to fill the space with questions. How was school? How was work? Did anyone need seconds? But over time, I'd ask less. Not because I didn't care, but because I started to feel like I was intruding. I remember how I placed a warm roll on Lana's plate. She didn't say thank you, just moved it aside. How had I not seen it then? The walls forming, the distance growing inch by inch. I thought I was keeping us close by cooking. It was all I knew. It was how I loved. A pot of stew was a hug. A pie cooling on the sill was an apology, a celebration, a conversation. I believed food could hold people together, but now I realized they had stopped tasting it long ago. They ate out more often, came home with fast food bags, "Don't worry, Mom, we already ate," David would say, brushing past me while I stood over a hot stove, apron dusted in flour. I'd smile and tell him it was okay, that I could save the meal for tomorrow, but I'd still sit alone and eat it myself, like some stubborn ghost clinging to a routine no one respected anymore. Even Nico, my sweet Nico, had changed. He used to sit with me while I cooked, tell me about the girls at school, his video games, his fears. But lately, he barely said more than "hey" and "night." I thought it was just teenage stuff. I didn't know he was pulling away entirely. They had all pulled away, slowly, deliberately, like a ship raising anchor inch by inch in the night, and I had helped them pack without knowing it. Every plate I washed, every towel I folded, every time I said, "Don't worry about me," I had made it easy for them to leave. I remember that stew now and realize it was the Last Supper, wasn't it? A final performance of family before the curtain fell. They knew it was the last meal. I didn't. I cleared their bowls that night, humming softly to myself, thinking about making apple crisp the next day. I even thought I'd ask Lana what show she wanted to watch, try to bridge the gap again. But the next morning, they were gone. No goodbye, no argument, no slammed door, just stew in the fridge, bowls in the sink, and me, standing there with love still in my hands, but no one left to give it to. I remember the first time Lana moved in. She was nervous, polite, eager to impress. She offered to help me fold laundry. She complimented my meatloaf. She called me Mom, though it always sounded rehearsed, like she was practicing a line she didn't believe. Over time, that rehearsed politeness wore off, like the way paint chips from old cabinets. Slowly, then all at once, there's a moment that keeps replaying in my mind now, though I had brushed it off when it happened. It was maybe 6 months ago. I had just set the table for dinner, spaghetti, garlic bread, a little salad, and called everyone down. They came, eventually, sat without looking up. As usual, Nico was on his phone, David scrolling through emails. Lana stared into her water glass, and then I heard her whisper under her breath, "She's not even working, all she does is cook." I didn't react. I wasn't even sure I'd heard it right. But the words hung in the air, thick and heavy like steam. My back was turned, pretending to grab napkins from the drawer, but my heart heard every syllable. I told myself she didn't mean it. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was frustrated. But the tone in her voice, it wasn't a passing complaint. It was resentment. That was the first time I saw it. The look in her eyes that hadn't been there when she first came into my home. Cold, controlled, like she had made a silent calculation and found me inconvenient. She started making comments more openly after that. Subtle things. "Do you ever think about downsizing?" I read an article that said multi-generational households can be emotionally draining. I think Nico's friends feel weird coming over. It's old-fashioned in here. Each line was a chisel, chipping away at my place in my own home. But David, he never said a word. He'd just glance at me with that nervous smile, the one that said, "Please don't make this harder." Like I was the one making things uncomfortable by existing. I started retreating after that. I'd take my meals into the kitchen, saying I wasn't hungry yet. I stopped asking if they wanted dessert. I cleaned more, spoke less. I thought, maybe if I gave them more space, they'd soften. But they didn't. They just took up the space I gave, until I had none left. Lana began locking doors, that used to stay open, whispering in rooms and pausing when I entered. The fridge started filling with groceries I didn't buy, foods I'd never eaten, almond milk, tofu, boxes labeled keto. None of it was for me. She had begun curating a life I didn't belong in, and David had let her. Now, with them gone, her cold eyes still haunt the corners of my house, not with regret. Number Lana never once looked at me with guilt, just strategy. She wasn't a villain in her mind. She was the heroine of her own story, one where I was the obstacle to remove, and she had removed me, not by kicking me out, but by building a life that no longer had space for the woman who warmed the house. A quiet erasure, perfectly executed, all while I was in the kitchen, baking bread. Of all the memories that keep me up at night, it's not Lana's bitterness or the slammed doors that haunt me most. It's David's silence, that heavy, familiar silence that wrapped around him like a second skin in the last year. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't loud, he didn't argue, he just stopped looking me in the eye. David was a quiet child, sensitive, thoughtful. When his father passed, he was only 12, and it felt like it was just him and me against the world. I held him through panic attacks. I worked double shifts so he could play Little League. I sat front row at every school play, clapping louder than anyone. He was my boy, my only boy. And yet, over the years, I watched Lana slowly become the center of his orbit. That's natural, I told myself. That's marriage. That's growth. But something changed after they moved in. At first, I thought he was just tired from work. But eventually I noticed. He never asked how I was. He stopped thanking me for meals. He didn't linger in the kitchen for late-night snacks like he used to. He became a visitor in his own mother's house. And I became the wallpaper. The last time we had a real conversation, we were sitting at the back porch. Nico was at a sleepover, and Lana was out with friends. It was just the two of us, like it used to be. I brought him a cup of tea, the kind he liked, peppermint, with a spoonful of honey. He smiled that weak, half-hearted smile that never reached his eyes, the one I'd seen so often lately. "You doing okay, Ma?" he asked, sipping. I nodded. I always am. But I paused. I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask, "What's wrong? What are you not telling me?" But I didn't. I was too afraid of the answer. So I said something smaller. "You've been distant lately." He looked away. "Just life, I guess. That's all. Just life." Now, sitting alone in the living room, I hear those words differently. Just life. Just him detaching, preparing, rationalizing. He didn't fight for me. He didn't say, "No, we can't do this to my mother." He didn't warn me or explain. He didn't write a letter or make a call. He just left. And in a way, that hurts more than Lana's schemes. She was never mine. But David, he was. I changed his diapers. I sang to him when he had the flu. I stayed up all night sewing a cowboy costume for his third-grade play. And in the end, all I got was a weak smile and a missing house key. I still make his tea sometimes, out of habit. I pour it, I let it cool, and I pour it out. It's ritual now, a small morning, a goodbye in stages. He didn't slam a door on me, he just never opened one. And when your own child doesn't choose you, you start to question if love was ever enough. There's something about betrayal that makes you see everything differently. Not just the people, but the objects they touched, the routines, the drawers. Even silence takes on a different shape. One morning, I found myself staring at the kitchen counter, where I always kept the checkbook. A plain blue ledger tucked between the old recipe box and a jar of pens. It wasn't where I left it. Not missing. Just moved. That tiny detail, the shift of 1 inch, was enough to send a shiver through me. I opened the ledger. Page after page of neat, old handwriting. Mine. Carefully documented grocery runs, electricity bills, doctor appointments, gas for the car. But then something new. A different pen. A different style. Check number 3,384. $3,500. Legal processing. Check number 3,385. $1,250. Title transfer fees. Both signed in what looked like my name. But it wasn't my handwriting. My hand began to tremble. I flipped faster. Check number 3,390. $4,800. Moving company. Check number 3,392. $950. Security deposit. Springfield. Springfield. That's over 2 hours away. They weren't just leaving. They had relocated. Quietly. Deliberately. And they had used my money to do it. I sat down hard at the kitchen table, the air gone from the room. I held the checkbook like it was made of glass, trying to find oxygen in betrayal. I had always kept the checkbook open, available, out of trust. I didn't think I had to hide things from family. After all, it was our house, our life, wasn't it? But now I realized I wasn't part of the hour anymore. I was the resource, the account, the backup plan, and the forgery. It wasn't just criminal, it was personal. David had once watched me sign every birthday card, every school field trip form. He knew my loops, my tilt, the way I crossed my T. For him to fake it, he had to study it, rehearse it. I pulled out a stack of old birthday cards, his handwriting from years ago. I compared it, side by side. It matched, too closely. I wanted to scream, to throw the ledger across the room. But I didn't. I placed it gently on the table and folded my hands. My breath was shallow. My eyes burned, not just from the lies, but from how easy it had been for them. People always think betrayal is loud, a shouted accusation, a slammed door, a family torn apart at Thanksgiving. But real betrayal, it's quiet, signed in cursive, backdated, processed through accounts you never thought anyone would touch. It's your own child writing checks to erase you while you're busy baking casseroles. I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, not to anyone, just into the space that used to be sacred. How long were you planning this, David? But no one answered. Only the tick of the kitchen clock, still counting down the minutes. In a house that might no longer belong to me. I hadn't stepped into Nico's room since the day they left. I couldn't. His door was still half open, like he might walk through it at any moment and say, "Sorry, Grandma, left my earbuds in here." But days passed, then weeks, and the house stayed silent, that empty kind of quiet that settles into your bones. Eventually, I made myself go in, not out of curiosity, but necessity. I needed to know if anything of me remained. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Stale deodorant, teenage body spray, and dust. The kind of scent that told me it hadn't just been abandoned in a rush. It had been cleared out. The bed was made. Neatly. Too neatly. The sheets didn't even have a crease. The bookshelves were bare, aside from a few school binders and an old baseball trophy from when he was 7. The drawers were open and empty. The laundry basket was gone. I stood in the middle of the room, turning slowly, unsure of what I was even looking for. And then I saw it. On the wall beside his desk Where his corkboard used to be was a faint square, lighter than the rest of the paint. He'd taken it down, of course, but what stung wasn't what was missing. It was what I saw still taped in the corner. A photo, one I'd never seen before. I walked closer. It was printed on regular paper, like something copied from a phone and rushed out of a printer. In it, David, Lana, and Nico stood together in front of a new house, a pale blue one with white shutters, smiling, arms around each other. No moving truck in sight, no boxes, just them, already settled. I stared at that photo, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't just a new beginning, it was a replacement, a new version of the family, a version that didn't include me. I looked at Nico's desk, the spot where he once did his homework, where I used to bring him milk and cookies just to check in. The Lego I accidentally vacuumed up, the video game controller I found under his bed and pretended not to notice when he lied about losing it. Every little moment I'd poured into him, erased with a click, a download, and a roll of tape. I ran my hand along the desk's surface. Dust clung to my fingertips. They had left no trace of me, and yet, one thing clung to the bookshelf. Wedged between two old spiral notebooks was a card. Folded, yellowing. I pulled it out slowly. It was a birthday card. From me. To my sweet Nico. May you always remember that your grandma loves you more than words can say. He had kept it. Tears blurred my vision. I clutched the card to my chest, unsure if he meant to leave it behind or if it had fallen through the cracks. Either way, it was still here, still proof. They might have scrubbed me from their new life, but Nico hadn't completely forgotten. And if he remembered, even a little, then maybe I wasn't erased. Not fully, not yet. The kitchen had always been my domain, my sanctuary, my purpose. Every day started and ended in that space, where the warmth of the oven softened the sharp edges of silence, and the smell of food stood in for the words no one said. Even when they didn't talk to me, even when they ate in front of the television instead of at the table, I still made sure dinner was ready. I still made sure the grocery list was stocked with their favorites. I found the list that morning while wiping down the counter. It was stuck to the fridge with the little magnet shaped like a tomato that Nico made in second grade. There it was, Lana's almond milk, David's favorite honey wheat bread, Nico's chocolate chip granola bars, my own staples, oatmeal, canned peaches, peppermint tea, were always at the bottom in tiny writing, almost an afterthought. I used to study that list like scripture, carefully organized, adjusted weekly depending on what they were craving or what was on sale. And I always made sure I remembered the little things. David liked mustard with his sandwiches, but hated pickles. Lana only ate red apples, never green. Nico wanted frozen waffles, but only the ones shaped like dinosaurs. I fed them every single day with that list. I kept track of the rhythms of their stomachs, the way some people keep time by the tides. But that list, the one I treated like proof of my usefulness, my presence, had meant nothing. They left without saying goodbye, without telling me where they were going. But they sure took every bite of food I'd stocked in their car before they did. My pantry had been half emptied, like a convenience store raided overnight. It was then that I realized they didn't leave, despite my care. They left because they no longer needed it. I looked down at the grocery list again. A new entry had been added, one I didn't write. In Lana's sharp, slanted handwriting, "Don't forget to cancel Grandma's debit card." It was scribbled in the corner like a reminder. like a chore. I stared at those words, my breath shallow, the edges of the paper curling in my hand. Not even a question mark, not even a second thought, as if I were a utility to be shut off, a subscription to cancel. I pulled the magnet from the fridge and threw the list in the trash. Then I opened the freezer and stared at the rows of meals I'd made and labeled with their names. For Nico, chicken pot pie. For Lana, butternut squash soup. For David, beef chili. Each package was neatly wrapped in foil, their names written in permanent marker. I spent hours making those, days sometimes. I used to imagine them pulling one out after a long day, warming it up, and thinking, Mom always took care of us. But now I saw them for what they were, leftovers for people who had already decided I was disposable. I grabbed every container and tossed them into the trash one by one, as if discarding the idea that care meant anything. That love, served hot and seasoned with memory, was enough to keep people tethered. The kitchen was quiet when I finished, too clean, too empty. And for the first time in my life, I stood in the place I'd always called mine and realized it had never been mine at all. It was the day after I found the list, the one that called me a debit card to cancel, when I heard a soft knock on the front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. The knock was polite, familiar. I opened it to find Sharon, standing on the porch, holding a tin of cookies, and wearing that kind of half-smile people wear when they don't know what to say. "Hi, Marjorie," she said. "I just thought I'd check in." Sharon lived 3 houses down. She wasn't exactly a close friend, but we'd shared plenty of porch chats and borrowed cups of sugar over the years. I noticed she didn't step inside. "I haven't seen the family around," she added, her eyes darting behind me into the hallway. "Thought maybe you were traveling." "Traveling," I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded. "Lana said you were going on some long trip, that you'd be gone for a while. Out east maybe." I stared at her. A trip, a lie. "They told you I was gone?" I asked, slowly. Her face paled. "Oh, well, I must have misunderstood. I just assumed, since the car's gone and the blinds have been drawn." "They're gone," I said, cutting her off gently. "David, Lana, Nico, they left. No note, no call, just vanished." Her mouth opened, then closed. She placed the cookie tin in my hands, like a peace offering. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." I nodded. "You're not the one who should be apologizing." She stayed for a few minutes. We talked about the weather, the town's fall festival coming up. She mentioned her own kids, how they never call either. But I could tell her mind was reeling, trying to piece together what she'd been told and what she now knew to be true. When she left, I stood at the door a while longer, the tin of cookies still warm in my hands. So that was the story they gave, that I had gone somewhere, that I had packed up, disappeared, as if I were the one who abandoned them. I laughed then, a short, bitter sound that echoed through the foyer. Imagine the irony. Not only had they erased me from their lives, but they'd rewritten the narrative too. In their version, I wasn't a burden they left behind. I was just gone, like a grandmother-shaped ghost who floated out the door one morning and never came back. Later, I walked around the house with new eyes. I noticed other signs. The absence of family photos in the common rooms. The missing framed prints of the 4 of us from years ago. They'd taken them all, left the furniture, left the dishes, but took the pictures. Even the one of Nico's first day of kindergarten. Gone. I stood in the hallway and whispered into the quiet, "You didn't just leave me. You tried to erase me." But what they didn't know, what they couldn't erase, was memory. And memory has teeth. So I picked up a pen, pulled out a fresh page, and began writing everything down. Every lie, every silence, every meal, every moment. Because if they were going to tell the world I disappeared, I would make sure the truth remained, line by line, word by word, until my voice was louder than their story. It started with a knock at the door, again. But this time it wasn't cookies or neighborly concern. It was a man in a pressed shirt, clipboard in hand, standing like he owned the porch. "Afternoon, ma'am. I'm here for the final inspection before the transfer of keys." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He double-checked the address. "Are you Mrs. Marjorie Eves?" "Yes," I said slowly, a knot beginning to tighten in my stomach. "Great. I've got you listed as the previous owner. The new buyers should be finalizing the deal next week. Just here to verify condition. We'll need access to the basement, attic, and—" I held up my hand. "Stop. What do you mean, previous owner?" He looked confused. "The house, it's been sold." My legs felt like they'd vanished beneath me. I gripped the edge of the door frame. "There must be a mistake. I never sold this house." He flipped a few pages. "Well, according to these documents, the title was transferred 3 months ago, through a trust. Signatories, David Eves and Lana Eves. All appears legal. Here's a copy, if you want to look." He handed me a sheet, printed, stamped, notarized. I recognized the address. I recognized their names. What I didn't recognize was the signature next to the line that said, "Original owner." It was my name, but not in my hand. A homicide vani, a clean, calculated, cruel forgery. I stepped back inside, closed the door gently, and locked it behind me. My heart was racing, but my body moved on its own. Straight to the drawer where I kept old mail, bank statements, the deed. The original deed. The one with my husband's name on it. The one we signed together when we bought this place in 1984. It was still there, but apparently it no longer mattered. I'd been robbed in broad daylight, not with a gun, not by strangers, but by my own family, with ink and a notary's stamp. While I made dinner and folded laundry, they were transferring the very roof over my head to their names, and then, eventually, to someone else's. This wasn't just abandonment anymore. It was theft, a premeditated vanishing act, performed with paperwork, silence, and a smile. They didn't just leave. They erased my name from the one thing I had built with my husband, the one thing I thought I'd leave behind when I was gone. I spent that evening sitting at the dining room table, a copy of the forged deed in one hand, my original in the other. The sunset poured gold light through the windows, the same way it always had. But it felt like a spotlight now, as if the house itself was watching me, helpless. And then the rage came, cold and calm. I whispered into the air, "You took everything, but you forgot who built it." The walls around me, the stove they used, the beds they slept in, the floors they walked on barefoot in the middle of the night. I cleaned them, I painted them, I paid for them. And now they belong to someone else, unless I did something fast and loud. They wanted me gone before I even knew I was leaving. But I wasn't gone yet, not by a long shot. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the wreckage of what I used to think was security. Paper statements, old receipts, utility bills with my name still on them. But legally, I no longer owned anything. Not the land beneath my feet. Not the pipes in the wall. Not even the bricks I helped lay with my husband's own 2 hands when we patched up the back addition. Cynthia had told me the truth, but living in the truth felt different than hearing it. The fact was, everything I thought I still had was already gone. They'd done it right under my nose. One change here, one document there, little steps, deliberate, disguised as help. Don't worry about the accounts, Mom. Let me handle the bills. Why don't we put your name on a trust, just to protect the house in case anything happens? It's too complicated to explain. Just sign here. And I did, because I trusted them, because I was their mother, because I thought love meant never having to look over your shoulder. I reviewed the trust documents Cynthia printed. I could barely read the legalese, but I saw the language clear enough. Transfer of ownership in full. David Eves, trustee. Marjorie Eves, no legal claim. The will I updated after my husband died? Nullified. The small inheritance I wanted to leave Nico? Absorbed. The garden shed full of antique tools I promised to donate to the local museum. Technically, not mine to touch anymore. I felt sick, not just at the loss, but at the deliberate erasure. I remembered when David was little, and he scraped his knee on the sidewalk. I sat on the ground with him, patched him up with cotton and peroxide, held him until he stopped shaking. That was love. And this was theft, dressed in Sunday smiles and "Don't worry, Mom" reassurances. What kind of person takes the roof from over their mother's head? What kind of woman signs the papers, helps him do it, and eats the dinner I cook that same night? I looked up at the ceiling, at the light fixture I'd replaced myself after the bulb shattered 2 winters ago. I had lit this home, cleaned it, protected it, and now the deed was in someone else's name. I walked to the living room and turned in slow circles, realizing for the first time that every object in here, my chair, my rug, my books, could legally be removed, sold, donated, trashed, because they weren't mine anymore. It felt like mourning, but no one had died, only trust had. I sat down, numb, and whispered to no one. You didn't just take my house, you took my home. But they hadn't taken my mind. They hadn't taken my truth. They hadn't taken my voice. And as long as I still had that, I could still fight. The freezer was the only place they'd left untouched. Funny, in a cruel way. I opened it out of habit, just looking for something to do with my hands. And there it was, a casserole, wrapped in foil, labeled in Lana's sharp handwriting. For you, don't call us. I stared at it for a long time. At first, I thought it was a joke, some kind of bizarre attempt at a parting gift. But the message was real, written in permanent marker, bold, final. It was tuna noodle, her least favorite, mine too. She must have made it with whatever was left in the pantry. A symbolic meal, cheap, easy, tasteless. A dish meant to say, here, you'll be fine, we're done. I closed the freezer door and leaned against it, the cold pressing into my back. Don't call us. 4 words, wielded like a knife. And yet, they hadn't thrown the casserole away. They had made it. They had labeled it. They had placed it neatly on the shelf. Why? Guilt? A final act of fake kindness? A way to silence their conscience by pretending they left me something to eat. It wasn't food. It was a message. You are alone now. We don't want to hear from you. You no longer exist in our version of the story. I took the casserole out and placed it on the counter. Let it sit there, watched as the frost melted into a puddle beneath it. I had fed those people for 20 years. I had put care into every dish, every flavor, every warm bite, meant to say, "You are home, you are safe, you are loved." And this was what I got in return. A single meal, sealed in a farewell, and laughed like an apology tossed in the trash. I peeled the foil back, not to eat it, but to face it, to see it, to smell the blandness of betrayal, baked into overcooked noodles and cheap canned soup. Then I threw it away, the whole dish, the foil, the container. I washed my hands in silence. The sink hissed like it, too, was tired of being used and taken for granted. Later that night, I made myself a proper dinner, a real one, from scratch, not because I needed it, but because I deserved it. Roasted chicken with thyme, carrots glazed in honey, a biscuit with real butter, a plate that looked like care. I set the table with one plate, one fork, one glass of water. I lit a candle, just for me, because that casserole in the freezer may have been their goodbye. But this dinner, this was my declaration. I am still here. I still have taste. I still have worth. And I will never eat what was handed to me by people who thought so little of my love. They boxed it up and called it a burden. There's something sacred about setting a table, even if it's just for one. The sound of the plate touching the wood, the soft clink of silverware, the way steam curls up from a freshly cooked meal. It reminds you that you're still here, that you still matter. That night, I roasted a small chicken, rubbed it with rosemary and garlic like I always did on Sundays. The carrots came from the farmer's market, ones I picked out myself, not from a list Lana emailed. The biscuit was fluffy, golden, made with cold butter and muscle memory. I placed everything just so. I even folded the napkin, not for show, for dignity. For the first time in years, I sat down at the table without anyone else. No David with his distracted nods. No Lana tapping on her phone. No Nico with his headphones around his neck, half listening. Just me, and the soft tick of the clock, and the smell of real food, made with real care. At first, I couldn't bring myself to take a bite. My hands trembled, my chest felt tight. It wasn't just a meal, it was a funeral. For the family I thought I had, for the mother I'd tried so hard to be. But hunger is honest. Eventually, I picked up my fork, and you know what? It was good, warm, savory, familiar in a way that wrapped around my grief like a shawl. Every bite said, "You're still here. You're still you. And no one can take this from you." Halfway through, I caught my reflection in the glass of the hutch. I looked tired, older than I remembered, but there was something else in my face too, something steadier, like someone coming out of the fog. I didn't cry, I thought I might, but the tears had already been wrung out in the days before. Now, all that remained was clarity. They were gone, but I wasn't. They had taken what they could, my house, my name, my role. But they hadn't taken my hands, my recipes, my strength. And with every bite I took, I felt something returning, something they had worked very hard to suppress. Ownership, not over a deed, not over a title, but over myself. I didn't save any leftovers, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. Tomorrow I'd cook something new, for no one but me. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough. The hardest part wasn't being alone. It was being seen as alone. In a small town like mine, people notice, people talk, and when your son, daughter-in-law, and grandson all disappear overnight without a goodbye, folks start filling in the blanks. At the market, the cashier, young girl, maybe 20, asked, "Oh, is your grandson off to college already?" I just smiled and nodded. What was I going to say? No, he left in the middle of the night while his parents sold the house out from under me and told the neighbors I was dead or vacationing. At church, Pastor John pulled me aside after service. "We've been praying for you, Marjorie. I hope the time apart brings everyone closer again." I didn't correct him. I didn't explain that time apart was their idea, not mine. That I was left behind, not off on a journey of reflection. The whispers came next. Little half sentences I caught in the post office, the library, even outside the diner. "Did you hear what happened with the Eves family? I heard she signed the house over willingly. Well, I always wondered if they resented living with her. It's hard, you know, generational stuff. Everyone had a theory. No one had the truth, because the truth was messy. And no one likes messy. So I became a character in someone else's gossip. The poor old woman, or the difficult mother-in-law, or the bitter matriarch who pushed them away. Depending on who you asked, I was either too much or not enough. But none of them were in my kitchen. None of them saw the empty hooks where their coats used to hang. None of them smelled the coffee go cold beside 3 empty chairs. One afternoon, I went into the pharmacy to pick up my blood pressure pills. The clerk, Edith, bless her, reached across the counter and touched my hand gently. "I always thought you were too kind for all that," she whispered. "All what?" She hesitated. "Well, what they did." That was the first time someone said it plain. Not behind their hand, not wrapped in pity, just said it. And I felt my throat tighten, not from hurt, from relief, because someone knew. Maybe not all the details, but enough. I walked home that day, taller than I had in weeks, because the shame wasn't mine, and I was done wearing it like a shawl. Let them whisper. Let them theorize. The truth lived in the freezer, where they left a casserole like a warning. The truth lived in my checkbook. The truth lived in me. And I had started to speak it, one person, one meal, one conversation at a time. They could tell whatever version they liked, but my version had a witness now. And soon, it would have many. I raised you to be kind, to be honest, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I taught you how to tie your shoes, how to write your name, how to say please and thank you. You have now taken everything from me, quietly, strategically, and without an ounce of courage to face me. You didn't just leave. You orchestrated an escape. You sold my house. You used my money. You forged my name. You didn't just exit, you erased. Lana, you sat at my table. You let me cook for you, care for you, believe you were family, but you were always building a world that didn't include me. You did not have to love me, but you chose to harm me. That's worse. Nico, I do not blame you. You are still a child, and I love you. I always will. I hope one day you'll remember the smell of cinnamon rolls, the sound of stories before bed, and the warmth of someone who never stopped showing up. I am not writing to ask you back. I do not want apologies. I want you to know I survived you. I am still standing. I am rebuilding. You thought you were writing me out of the story, but I've picked up the pen now. Sincerely, Marjorie Eves. I printed the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in an envelope. No return address, just my name, clean, unafraid. I walked it to the post office myself, gave it to Cheryl at the counter. She looked at the envelope, then at me. "Want tracking on this?" she asked gently. "No," I said. "I don't need to know if they read it." She nodded. She didn't ask anything else. She stamped it, slid it into the bin, and gave me a smile that said more than words. As I walked out into the late afternoon sun, I felt something lift from my chest. Not joy, not relief, something better. Clarity. The words had left me, and now they belonged to the people who tried to silence me. I didn't need to wait for a reply. The reply was in my own 2 feet, walking away, still upright, still warm, still me. They may have taken my name off the deed, but the walls still remember my hands. Every corner of this house holds a piece of me, pressed into the grout, woven into the curtains, folded into the sheets I still sleep on alone. The new owners moved in last week, young couple, polite. They waved when they saw me out front, trimming the hydrangeas that still bloomed wild by the fence. They don't know the history of this place. Not really. They know square footage and taxes and mortgage rates. But they don't know that this was where my husband first told me he loved me, where my son took his first steps, where I spent 40 years trying to keep something whole. But that's okay. It's no longer mine to explain. I've moved into a small rental a few streets over, 1 bedroom, quiet, not fancy, but I chose it. With my name on the lease, my money, my rules. It smells like paint and fresh start. I brought only what mattered. My books, my cast iron skillet, a quilt my mother made, and a photograph, one I found hidden behind the dresser the night before I left the house for good. It's of me, younger, smiling, flower on my cheek, holding David, still a toddler, in one arm, and a wooden spoon in the other. We were in the old kitchen, before the remodel, before the lies, before they turned me into a shadow. I framed it and put it by the window, because I need to remember her too, the woman who gave everything, who made warmth out of nothing, who cooked even when no one said thank you. She deserved more, but she didn't disappear. She became me. Last Sunday, I made dinner just for myself. Cornbread, roast vegetables, sweet tea. I turned on the radio. I lit a candle. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just ate slowly, savoring the quiet that finally felt like peace, not punishment. I've started volunteering at the local library, helping kids with their reading. I joined a senior writing group. I'm even thinking about taking a cooking class, not because I need to learn, but because it's time someone else fed me for once. Sometimes, I still wake up thinking I hear Nico's laugh, or David's footsteps on the stairs. But then I remember, memory is not a curse. It's a record. It's proof I was here. And when people ask me now, "Don't you miss the house?" I smile and say, "No. The house missed me, because the truth is, they tried to erase me, but I became permanent, not in title, in legacy, in voice, in me. And now I'm writing the rest of the story myself, page by page, with no one else holding the pen."